It's the greatest podcast in the history of the world.
It goes high up and under the full forward. Becky's taken a ripper!
He has a bounce, he crosses 50, he pins the ears back, and he drills the goal!
All the latest news and views from around the VAFA.
Here's the big man!
The big guy.
He's done it again! This bloke extracts some of the finest!
All thanks to Mequicare, proud partner of the VAFA.
Makes a name for himself with these long bombs from outside the arc. It's a long bomb from outside the arc!
This is for the love of the game.
You can tweet that and hashtag it bloody good.
Welcome to For the Love of the Game. Thanks to Mequicare, our good friends who look after 16,500 people across Victoria each and every week. My name's Jason Bennett alongside Paddy Grindlay and debutante.
Yes.
He's got his, do we give him a baggy green, a baggy blue or something,
I think
suppose?
baggy
Sort of
blue.
a baggy navy.
There's a lot of jumpers around VAFA HQ that maybe we can bestow upon our new panel member as For the Love of the Game goes.
Congratulations. Here's your baggy navy. Pat Cortazzo, our VAFA Media special comments analyst. Welcome.
Thanks, Jace. Thanks, Paddy. It's 15 years in the making since last time I was out here at Elston Wick Park, so looking forward to it.
What was the last time you were out at EP for, mate?
Playing for some beads in
Right.
19. So, yeah, it's been a long time in the making.
Well, welcome back. It's great to have you here this morning. And let's turn our attention straight away to William Buck Premier Men's. It was an incredible weekend of footy, Paddy, and a couple of miracle comebacks really headlined the round. One of the most astonishing back from the dead performances we've seen in recent years occurred at Melbourne University Oval. It was Uni Blacks pulling off the seemingly impossible to steal the most unlikely of last gasp wins from St Kevin's. There was very little between the sides all afternoon. Blacks led by 5 at quarter time, Scob by 4 at the half, Blacks by a point at the final change. In fact, 8 points was the biggest lead throughout the entire first 3 quarters, and that was held by the Blacks early in the third term. St Kevin's kicked 3 goals in 5.5 minutes, entering time on in the final quarter, and that game-high 18-point lead sort of felt at that stage, they've finally cracked the game open. Good effort from the Blacks, but the Scob have got them late. But Matthew Grocott got it back to 13 points. They still trailed by 12 at the 31-minute mark. The Blacks needed a miracle. They'd only kicked 8 goals for the day, and the miracle arrived. Ben Oliver kicked one at the 31-minute mark to make it a 1-kick game. Kane Loftus bobbed up to receive a handball straight out of the restart. He kicked a goal on the run from 45. That tied up the scores. Blacks went forward again. Desperate scramble. Ball up in the pocket, quick kick out of defence, and it went straight onto the chest of this man. Cometh the moment, cometh the man. Welcome, Joel Ernest.
Thanks very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Mate, talk us through those dying minutes. In fact, talk us through when it was a 3-goal game and Scob had finally looked like they'd cracked you open late in the last quarter.
Yeah, well, like we've had a bit of an interesting season, and we've been down at points, and there's been times where we sort of, usually it happens in the second quarter, where we let the opposition get on the run. And we sort of spoke pretty clearly about how we're going to stop momentum and how we're going to try and get it back on our terms. And this was pretty late in the game, obviously, where we were backs against the wall and had to attack. And so, yeah, it was probably easy to roll over, but the Blacks boys digged in, and we, yeah, as you said, managed to get those few goals. And even as it was happening, sort of, we're at for probably like 31 minutes in by the time we got our third last goal. It felt like the siren was going to sound at any moment, but the bench was telling us still 3 minutes to play, and then when I took my mark, I think there was about a minute to go. Yep. This is when the scores were level, and I was probably having to kick from about 51, 52 metres. And once I knew I sort of had the distance, I was taking as long as I possibly could, making sure to soak up the clock and make it that any score was going to be a win for us. And it just happened to sail through for a goal. But yeah, it was some great celebrations from the boys.
You'd only kicked 6 goals in the past 2.5 years, you personally, so you're not a renowned goal kicker in recent times. But as you were going back, well, firstly, that quick kick came out of you guys obviously set up the wall really well. Quick kick, blind defensive kick out of the back pocket onto your chest. What was going through your mind for that next sort of, as you said, you had the calmness and the composure to think about wasting time.
Yeah.
Talk us through what was going through your mind in that last minute or so.
Yeah, well, we obviously got the ball in deep into our forward line, and that's when obviously we want our mids to go to work, and there's forwards around. And it was pretty chaotic. Like, any score, any sort of way that we could rush it through would be a winning point. And so as I was playing on the wing, so I pulled out to the sort of around the 50, and then ball went up, and I thought that it was going to be a big contested pack situation, but it just happened that it came onto my chest, and once I realised that I was within range, I sort of took as much time as possible. I mean, I played a fair bit of. I haven't kicked goals in the recent past, but played a fair bit of forward footy for the Blacks, so it wasn't uncommon for me to be having a shot down this end of the ground.
Have you kicked a game winner before, Joel?
I haven't kicked a game winner, no, but I was just making sure not to play on. I really wanted the siren to go so that there was no chance of them going back the other way in case it was a point, but not to be. I think there was about 3 or 4 seconds on the clock by the time the umpire signalled and I went through. So at the restart, the siren was pretty soon after.
Joel, this is, I think, your 143rd game for the University Blacks over your career. I loved what was going on the social media going around after the game, the reaction from the crowd. And I think the caption on some of the Instagram stories was, "This was the loudest crowd I've ever heard at Melbourne University Oval." Would that be correct?
Yeah, certainly. It certainly could have been. We've had some good wins around the place, on the road especially. I mean, we've been there at Elstonwick Park with some big crowds, but at the Uni Oval we've got obviously when we play our cross-change room rivals, the Blues. So in the last couple of years there's been some pretty big crowds and some favourable results for the Blacks. So that's been great. But yeah, certainly this year this was the biggest crowd and a fantastic send-off from the supporters, all the coaches and support staff for the Blacks, as well as family, friends, and it was Indigenous round as well. So we had a great support from our past players as well.
It leaves you in a nice little spot to win as you go into the week off. You're 4-4. You're sort of well positioned to try and keep with the rest of the competition. Of course, 4-4 is equal fourth as far as the ladder is concerned in William Buck Premier. What was Dale Bauer's address in the rooms after the game? Was it about celebrating the moment or trying to use the win as a springboard into the second half of the season?
Yeah, I mean, a combination of the both. We really wanted. He's super proud. His pride in the group was very clear. He was actually talking about how proud he was for us to stay so close to St Kevin's and get us into a spot midway through the last quarter before the game started slipping away. So he mentioned that he was actually even more proud of us for the win, of course. But then it really does, as you said, opens up an opportunity for us to be, 4-4 and knowing that our best is good enough to compete with any side, and really gives us a lot of hope going into future games against those top teams. We've got Old Brighton in a couple of weeks' time, so knowing that we can produce what we did on the weekend just gives us a big hope, and the team are constantly maturing and we're starting to hit our stride. So I think the confidence in the second half of the year is really high for the playing group.
Yeah, Brighton, St Bernard's, Old Zavs and Old Haileybury. So a season-defining month post the bye for the Blacks.
Hey, Jolie, Pat here. You won your last 3 in a row, but you had the close call against Scotch where you had a good, strong start and then faded a little bit in that game. But what did you learn from that game that has helped you in the last 2 weeks, particularly because you finished so strong against D-Lar and then on the weekend?
Yeah, I think that we've maybe historically we've gone down in those close games. I certainly know that in the last couple of years there's been less than 10-point losses for the Blacks, and when you're winning only a handful of games in the season, those couple of point and 1 goal losses can be really critical towards the end of the year. So I think that it was the opposite against St Kevin's where we had the large lead and they came back, but we just found a way to hold on and in those tense moments play the game as it came and control the play when we needed to, and that's what I was talking to about the maturing group. We're sort of getting into these situations where we've had to adapt and work together. And that win against Scotch probably set us up for a really strong performance against D-Lar. Different situation, but we were able to play out the full 4 quarters, which often there's been lapses in games where we've dropped for 5-10 minutes, get the opposition back in the game or to kick a few goals. And I think that sort of carried through to the St Kevin's game on the weekend, where we were just able to push out the full duration of the game, but also when the moments were there and it was tight, we were able to control it, attack when we needed to, or hold on to it and control the game when we had to as well.
Well, congratulations again, Joel, on what will be an unforgettable moment, I'm sure, in your football career. And what you've done over the last 3 weeks is put your destiny back in your own hands. And over the next month, you get to take on some of the top teams in the competition and, you know, give you a great indication of where you're at as a group. And if you can knock a couple off, you can get yourself entrenched in the top 4. So good luck.
Yeah, that's the goal. Excellent. All right. Thanks, Jace, Paddy and Pat. Appreciate it.
Well, Saturday's other remarkable finish came at Camberwell Sports Ground. Old Scotch storming home to break University Blues hearts once again. The Blues ended on a 3-game losing streak, despite playing better footy than that would suggest, and their inability to close out games had been costly, and unfortunately for them, it had proved to be once more. They actually led the Cardinals by a point at half-time, got out to 19 points at the final change after they'd kicked 5 goals to 2 in the third term, completely dominated territory, 14 inside 50s to 5 in that third quarter, but the Cards were buoyed by their final term against the Blacks a fortnight ago. They peppered away early. The James Tarrant goal extended the Blues back out to 16 points at the 8-minute mark, got back to 10 points a minute later, and then suddenly the game turned on its head, courtesy of this man. Welcome, James Tarrant.
Hi, guys. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for your time, mate. We appreciate it. Did you feel the swing in the game coming, or did it just happen?
Probably a little bit of both. I probably didn't expect it to swing quite as dramatically as it did in the end, but I felt like as the game was wearing on, our mids were sort of starting to get their hands on a bit more ball, which was giving us plenty of opportunities. So it certainly was unexpected, the degree to which we swung the game, but I think we felt like it was coming.
You personally kicked 5 goals in 13 minutes. What's it like when you get on a roll like that and you sort of feel like athletes talk about being in the zone. Did you feel like you're in the zone?
Yeah, it was a funny feeling. It's the first time I've ever had anything like that happen. But you sort of just, it starts rolling and you just go along for the ride because it doesn't happen often. So I was trying to enjoy it while it was happening.
James, I like how you started this discussion with speaking about how your midfielders started to get on top where you've booted 5 goals in 15 minutes to turn the game. It's a very modest from you, what we've come to expect. Fans of the VAFA will know that you've been spending most of this year playing for North Melbourne VFL. You've been down there for a couple of years. What I'm interested in is, I was told you did your pre-season in 2024 down back. So how have you found your evolution as a player has gone over the last couple of years and getting the exposure both at a high level of VAFA footy but also at VFL level?
Yeah, it's been a funny sort of journey for me. I've sort of always played lots of different positions, so it wasn't unusual for me to sort of swing between back and forward over the years. And down at North, that was where we sort of tried it at first, sort of see how I went down there, and then went back and forth a little bit. But I sort of found a home this year as a forward, which is probably where I've played most of my footy in the VAFA, and that's sort of been where I probably feel most comfortable now as a forward. And I think but having had the experience playing as a defender, you kind of know, what defenders like and what they don't like. And it's sort of given me a few little extra tricks up my sleeve that I think has put me in good stead.
Hey, James, Pat here. So I've got a little knock on you guys. When I've been looking at the stats for this year, that you haven't been overly direct. Been a high disposal team, but low inside 50s. But was that something that the group has addressed over the last, say, 2 weeks, or even on the weekend at 3/4 time going into last quarter with how that turned around?
I mean, it's kind of how we've always played over the last couple of years. We like to use the ball and spread the ground and make other teams defend as much as we can. But I think at times when we're trying to swing the game, we just, especially as forwards sometimes, we just want them to get the ball in there. So it was a little bit of chatter at 3/4 time around going a little bit more direct, but at the same time, when the options are there, we like to spread the ground and use the ball as much as we can. So it's not. I'm not surprised to hear that we are a high disposal team.
Yeah, it worked. Certainly when you're on top, it really does work for you. You stream forward in waves. You converted a 19-point deficit into a 22-point win on the weekend that sees you close within percentage of the top 4. You've had to chase the season a little bit after losing players, obviously including yourself, to VFL duties early in the year and some injuries on top of it. Where do you guys feel like you're at right now as you sort of sit there? You've managed to close the gap back to the top 4.
Yeah, I think we were a little bit disappointed with how the year started. We obviously had a good win in the opening round against St Kevin's, but then sort of let ourselves down a little bit over the following weeks. But to get back to sort of square the ledger at this point, where we were happy with that. That was kind of our goal after those early weeks where we lost a few games. So to get to this point, I think we're sort of resetting over this break, and then I think we feel that we're in a reasonable position now to approach this sort of next stage of the season and really build. It's not that different to how we went last year. We struggled a little bit early, and then as the season went on, we sort of developed and gelled a bit better. And I think we were actually in a pretty similar position last year, and it turned out pretty well. So I think we've got confidence that we can mix it with the best, and when we're playing at our best level, we're going to be pretty hard to beat. But having said that, we know there's quite a lot of good teams out there at the moment. So we're just looking to keep building.
James, you've had a number of new faces come through this senior team this year. One of those that's been around through this run is Jake Tawney. I'm really impressed by him in the first game of the season, and I was particularly impressed by your president, Will Strange, labelling him the Ferret at half-time, seemingly off the top of his head. I just wanted to check if that's a nickname that's stuck at all for Jake, or whether he's picked a different one out for himself.
Well, that's the thing with nicknames. You don't always get to pick them, but he does get ferret a little bit, so that is one that's stuck a little bit for Fantastic. Him. So, that's... We love Tawny. He actually was really important in that last quarter as well on the weekend. He kicked a couple of really important goals. So he's been a really great addition this year, and he'll only get better the more he plays with us.
The bye coming up, and then St Kevin's on the other side of the bye at TH King in round 9. That's always a fantastic contest. St Kevin's and Old Scotch.
Yeah, no, we love playing St Kevin's. It's always a good battle, and we got them in the first round this year, so I'm sure they'll be looking to get us back. So we'll be ready to go. We'll turn up at TH King. It's always a tough trip out there, and I know they had a pretty heartbreaking loss this week, so I'm sure they'll be raring to go after the bye.
Paddy will be turning up there as well. That'll be our SEN game in round 9. Live streaming on vafa.com and on the SEN app coming up Saturday week. St Kevin's and Old Scotch. Looking forward to it. James, congratulations again. Thanks for your time.
No, thanks, guys.
On to Old Haileybury and St Bernard's, and the Bloods made it 5 straight wins with a hard-fought 2-goal win over what were a persistent and resilient St Bernard's at Princes Park. The Bloods rocketed out of the blocks. They kicked the first 4 goals of the game. Snow Dogs then stabilised, hit back with 3 of their own, got it back within a single kick at the first break. The visitors then kicked 2 of the first 3 goals in the second term, levelled the scores, and it was clear that it was going to be a fantastic game from that point onwards. Paddy, you were there.
Yeah, it was. It was a highly contested game, and it was particularly for St Bernard's off the back of how they went against Scotch last week. It was how they were going to respond against Old Haileybury, and we dubbed them the Road Dogs, and I think I got a new name for Old Haileybury, who now are undefeated at home, the Homebrews, the old Homebrews. But it was a really, really good contest, and it really broke open in that third quarter for Old Haileybury. And probably the key player for me watching it was Mitch Kirkwood-Scott. He had a big game in total, and I gave him best on ground. But particularly in the third quarter, he had 9 disposals and 5 intercept marks. And it just felt like any time St Bernard's were trying to get any momentum or forward, he was just everywhere.
Bloods led by 14 points at half-time after they kicked the final 2 goals of the half and then took control in the third term. There was really front-half potency, wasn't it, in the third? The difference between the two teams, they took 6 marks inside 50 in the third quarter. They kicked 5 goals to 1, despite only having 3 more inside 50s for the term. Every time it went in there, they looked like scoring.
Yeah, and it was just where they were getting because of the intercept marks Mitch Kirkwood-Scott was taking, but also too just some of those turnovers were shallow. It was hard for St Bernard's to defend it, and they were going back quite direct, and so that was the telling part looking at that third quarter.
They got out to 38 points in front at the final change, but credit to the Snow Dogs, they didn't go down without a fight. In fact, they kicked the first 5 of the first 6 goals of the quarter, and at one point, you looked at the clock and you looked at the scoreboard and you thought, hang on, they're within 13 points. There's still plenty of time on the clock.
Yeah, and it looked like they swapped jumpers at three-quarter time. All of a sudden, you were looking at every contest and thinking St Bernard's just have the outnumber, and I got a bit worried actually at the start of that fourth quarter because every time Old Haileybury got the ball, it felt like they were starting to play that kind of chip mark game, almost what you do when you've got a couple of minutes left in the game. So it was a bit of a concerning sign, and they just kept turning up. And realistically, it probably could have actually been a lot closer. Matty Watson had a few extra shots he could have put on the board too that he probably would normally score as well. So it was a very good display by St Bernard's to try and at least finish out the game strong.
At least, and in the end, Charlie Harrop kicked the settler out to 12 points, and they another win, Paddy, that entrenches them inside the top three, and now they're 2 games clear of fourth. They're one of the stories of the year.
They really are, and I think this is the benefit of working on your craft through your midfield over the pre-season to be able to take on the competition's very best. We've seen them be competitive against the likes of Zabs and Old Brighton for a time, which we rank really highly, Pat, across the competition as far as contested units go. How did you find the Bloods' midfield performance on the weekend?
Yeah, well, look, to be honest, I think probably St Bernard's actually had the better of them, particularly at clearances as well. There was, I think it was about ball ups and throw-ins that really, I thought St Bernard's just looked a lot better. I think even maybe Wardy might have mentioned it in the post game as well, reading the report. But
outstanding report that.
Yeah, but it was really a turnover game, and where they were able to change the angles. I think that was what St Bernard's actually did well at times, is really force them to kick down the line and intercepted off that. But when they were able to look to open side and get speed on the ball, and they like to take territory forward handball team, they were really potent.
Jack Bell, Jake Gasparini, both great as well for the Bloods, along with Mitch Kirkwood Scott, while Dom Sullivan, Charlie Vague and Karan Barati were amongst the Dogs' best. We turn our attention to Toorak Park. No such final quarter nerves at Toorak. Old Zaverians comfortably in command of Collegians all afternoon. They were in the front foot from the outset. They kicked the only 5 goals of the opening term. They kicked the first 6 of the game, did Zabs. The Lions finally found a major approaching time on in the second term. Alex Lukic then kicked the last couple of goals of the half. Got it back to 26 points rather at the major break. But any thoughts of a Collegians comeback snuffed out? The Zabs booted 4 goals in 8 minutes to start the second half. And from there, really, Paddy, you were at this game. It was all academic.
Yeah, Hugo Higginbotham and I rang Dan Donati, the coach of the Old Zaverians, across the week and sort of touched base with him about what he wanted to do. And he was really frustrated the week before against the Uni Blues by their ball use. There was a lot of bombing inside 50, a lot of shallow entries. And he emphasised to the pair of us, we just need to nip the ball around. We need to kick it between each other. We need to cross over halfway. Lots of use of the ball between the arcs, and that's exactly what happened. The ability the Old Zavs have to use the footy between the arcs, to change angles, to get their prime movers involved is first class. Like Campbell Lane, he had 41 disposals I've seen you've written in your article, Jace. I reckon he had about 25 of those to half-time because they just look for him every time. He's a beautiful user of the footy, and some of the kicks inside 50, the delivery that Charlie McIsaac had particularly was just outstanding. Charlie Westcott as well on long leads. The thing that interests me, Pat, about the Old Zavs is that they're one of the leading teams for marks inside 50 and contested grabs in the competition, but they're not that big up front. They're not playing Ed Delaney. They're not playing Oscar Duncan in the ones because they can rely on their ball use between the arcs to cut up the opposition and find looks inside 50.
Yeah, and that's what can happen is really when you can get speed on the ball and your defenders just can't be stable. And they one thing I did notice when I watched them against Old Scotch a couple of weeks ago is just they're leading up and presenting at the ball really well too, and they want to hit leads instead of kind of getting forced to bomb it long. So that was something that was important. And you obviously mentioned that first quarter, Paddy, and plus 49 disposals and plus 13 contested possessions to go plus 11 inside 50s, and Campbell Lane having 12 of his 41 in that first quarter. So it really was set up from a strong start.
Marcus Stavro, another 28 disposals, 5 clearances. Alex Spralia, 21 disposals, 5 clearances and a goal out of the ruck. Sam Fisher, 21, 9 clearances, 5 inside 50s and a goal. So Campbell Lane aside, he had the massive numbers, but they just have a fleet of guys who just deliver week after week after week, and in the end, they just beat you by numbers.
Yeah, it's a really scary proposition when the midfield is in full flight because guys like Stavro and Fisher are really hard to get down. You saw that Max Pinchbeck, who was the tackling terminator at Collegians, was trying to hold on to Stav and Fisher. He's just unable to reduce them to a sloppy disposal. They're always able to get clean hands out, and when they burst from stoppage and from their clinches, geez, they're elite. It's unbelievable to watch. So Charlie McIsaac was our best. Another big hang. Unfortunately, not quite as good as the one against the Uni Blues that we didn't quite get on camera. He has promised me, though, that he's going to keep on trying to take mark of the century. And he had a little clip for our man, Joey Pignataro, on the way out, just asking Joey, could you please just tip us for once? Because he hasn't been looking after the Zabs.
The aura's back.
The aura is back. They are going to miss Campbell Lane, though, Jace, as you've written, for a month as he heads overseas. But there might be a big midfield recruit coming to Toorak Park imminently.
Yes, the whispers on the grapevine that a very big name is going to roll up to Toorak Park in the next couple of weeks. Nathan Bouch was best for Collegians, 32 touches in a hard-working performance.
And we should mention that's Nathan Bouch's last game of the year before he heads over to London for a job. And it's going to be, I think it's a real shame to miss Bouch playing through the back end. Beautiful use of the footy. Not a tall guy, about 172, 173 centimetres, but brave as they come, finds a lot of the footy. So we wish him well in London.
Final game of the weekend, pitted top versus bottom. Old Brighton delivering as the ladder would suggest it would. A healthy win over De La Salle at Brighton beat JOEL. The ladder leaders didn't have it all their own way early, though. De La kicked the first 2 goals of the game before the Tunners kicked 4 of the next 5 goals, got their noses in front at the opening break. De La again, interesting part about this, it was on repeat this game. De La had kicked the first goal of each quarter, and then the Tunners would take over from there. So they led by 26 at halftime. They peeled off the next 7 goals in the third quarter to put the result beyond doubt. And in the end, it was Old Brighton finishing with the last 4 goals of the game. They'll head to the bye with a perfect 8 zip record, courtesy of an 86-point win. And the star of the show in this one, Will Lewis, the VFL-listed Bulldog, had a day out up forward. He kicked 10 goals in a sensational performance, 23 disposals, 12 marks, 8 tackles, 10 goals in one of the great individual displays in Premier Men's so far this season. Tom Fisher, another excellent game from him. He had 30 touches for the Tunners. Ryan O'Meara was best for De La with 26, 11 marks and 7 rebounds.
I'm feeling for our man James Tarrant, who we've just spoken to, because he's kicked 8 goals, 5 in the last quarter, and basically won his team the game, you could argue, for the Cardinals. And he hasn't even had the best performance up front in the division. So massive from Will Lewis. Pat, he's a really classy operator. I've seen a lot of him behind the footy playing as an interceptor, but clearly when he goes up front, he has no issues. What do the numbers tell you?
I think also too, sometimes when you look at those guys that can play defence and then they go forward as well, they learn the craft of defence and what they need to do to nullify a forward. And then when they can switch over, they know where the weaknesses are of the defender they're playing on. So yeah, for him to have that type of display, considering he pretty much single-handedly beat them by themselves. But yeah, for De La, it's just again another, I guess, tough season around just the learnings they can take each week, and even just just being able to look at that first quarter and say, okay, against the good side, what did we do well, and what can we just take into the next block of games?
Before we move on from Premier Men's, we've got you in today. We know you've done a bit of work and sort of scraped through the stats, etc., to sort of find some key numbers around each of the Premier Men's sides. We've played 2 months of footy now, so it's a good sample size from a statistical perspective. Let's start with De La Salle. Obviously yet to win a game. Where are the areas and the room for improvement that you think Nick Highland will probably be looking at over the bye?
Yeah, well, it is tough when you have a team like that. They've won 6 of 32 possible quarters. So what ends up happening, you feel when you're a team like that, you have to break it down to almost the quarter level. You can't look at the whole match as the whole picture. And, looking at those quarters, I tried to dig a little bit deeper into them. And where they've actually, when they've won those quarters, it's really been able to control the ball a little bit. Their uncontested mark differential's been positive, as well as their ground ball. So they're actually hunting. And so probably I think when you look at for De La as well, it'd be very much looking at your contest work, what numbers you have. Do you get good balance? Looking at a bit of the opposition and what they've been able to do against you, but really 110 points per game against, the defense is the side where, maybe doing a few things around whether you have to play a +1 or do you try and have extras at the contest to help resource that as well. But yeah, for them, I think it's just looking at the quarter wins and trying to find what worked and then just building that and the learnings you can take from playing a team like Old Brighton, who are, they've won by far the benchmark at the moment.
Speaking of Old Brighton, they've got positives right across the board statistically. Is there anything in particular that stands out from your perspective? I mean, they've been great everywhere. Is there anywhere in particular where they really are beating up on teams?
Oh, everywhere. They're just to me, they feel like the chameleons. It just doesn't matter what type of game they play. If they have to play a contested game, they can match it. If they need to possess the ball and play just a more uncontested game, they can match it. And so, yeah, for me, it's, they were the team to beat last year until the last couple of weeks of the year, and this year they've done the same thing. They're 8 straight, where last year they were 7-1. So, they rank 1 across the board in every area. It's hard as an opposition trying to find weaknesses in their game.
Jace, I'm loving the nicknames for our man, because we've had the Road Dogs, now we've got the Brighton Chameleons. We might, I think by the end of the year we might have one for everyone, which would be great.
So Brighton are out in front at 8 and zip, 2 games behind, sitting in second and third are Zabs and Old Haileybury. Let's start with Zabs. Where have Zabs been particularly good, and is there anywhere in particular that Dan Donati might be looking at over the bye going, hey, we've still got room for improvement here?
Yeah, well, I think it's definitely Brighton, but they're the solid second team at the moment. Looking points, 4 points against, they rank second in both areas. Probably where the only kind of blemish that I saw them have really in the first couple of weeks was just their inaccuracy against St. Kevin's when they did drop that game. But then, yeah, I guess for the old Brighton game, you lose by 10 goals in that. So that's probably where you want to nullify that gap, I guess, in terms of that game in particular. But realistically, yeah, they're one game ahead of where they were last year. They were 5-3 last year, and they're 6-2 this year. It's probably just at times, maybe looking even just at their stoppages and their scores against from stoppage. The St. Kevin's game in particular, they were inaccurate. I think they were 1-7 in that game. So, look, for the most part, they're definitely in they're second at the moment, really behind old Brighton. So it's just probably just a few little areas where it's let them down in quarters and they're just trying to polish that up and tidy that up. But they're definitely, solid in second position.
Old Haileybury sitting alongside them at 6-2 as well. What have you made of the Bloods' first 8 weeks of the season?
Yeah, they've been impressive. Yeah, considering that they've been promoted and they were 6-2 last year in Prem B, and then they're coming up to Prem A, and they've got the same record. And yeah, 4-0 at home, which we spoke about a little bit earlier, and they're outright third again, 4 points against their third too. But probably the only stat that Prem Data doesn't have that I'd probably watching them play and think that that's really been a positive in their game is just their forward handballing and, the meters they get from that. They're very much a territory team, strong contests. Probably the big thing last year for them from a ground ball perspective, no playing was Prem B, but they were first in that area. They're 7th this year for that. So you saw on the weekend a little bit when St. Bernard's were able to get more numbers to the contest and compete in there. It did let them down, but for the most part, they've been pretty good. Probably for me, the one that I'd be trying to clean up a little bit is definitely the clearances, and particularly their 9th for ball up clearances. And that was an area where St. Bernard's really got them on the weekend. So that's probably one I'd be looking at tidying up.
So the top 3 teams are clear at the moment. They've kicked 2 games clear of everyone else, and the battle for 4th spot is on in earnest. There's 4 teams sitting at 4-4 at the moment. St. Kevin's on percentage have that 4th spot. After dropping the game on the weekend, they sit at 4-4. What have you made of the Scob?
Yeah, well, they're a competitive team. When you look at the they've either won well or they've had the close games where they've didn't get the result against Brighton, but were very competitive. Most of their numbers are quite solid, really. They're probably sitting in 3rd and 4th for a lot of key areas. Probably the thing I noticed the most from that old Haileybury game is just a little bit of ill-discipline at times. They actually did well to be in the contest and compete. They probably just need a little bit more. Just a bit more efficiency going forward. That was the one area as well from that old Haileybury game that they struggled with. But it's just eliminating those bad patches. They were particularly looking at that old Haileybury game. They gave up free kicks late in quarters that resulted in goals in a game where they're not scoring a lot either. So you want to be able to nullify that. But they were another tough team to kind of dissect, because I feel like looking at last year, they were 6-2 and they're 4-4, but you could probably argue they've had games where they could easily be 6-2 if results go their way. So they're definitely up there, and I think it's just really just trying again, probably the little bad patches, getting that out of their game.
If they're in a little bit of a bad patch at the moment, they've lost their last 2. St. Kevin's, a team that's won its last 2, is old Scotch, which are now in that 4-4 pack chasing. We heard a little bit of insight with you and James Tarrant talking about how they like to chip the ball around a bit. Tell us a little bit more about the Cards.
Yeah, well, they are a high disposal team. Yeah, they're 3rd in the comp for disposal diff, but in the areas, the inside 50s, they're 7th for inside 50 diff. So and watching them against old Zavs, it did feel like at times that trying to possess the ball, it definitely helps in eliminating the pressure against good contested teams as well. Yeah, when teams are good ground ball and contested, being able to control the ball and make them having to defend longer patches is something. But it's more being direct and looking at even the last quarter of the Scotch game, they were +6 clearances, +12 inside 50s, but only took 7 uncontested marks in that quarter, and they put on 8 goals 5. So there's an element of maybe just when they've got those chances to go a bit more direct as well. But look, they're at the same position as what James said in the interview too. They were 4-4 at 118% last year, and they're 4-4 at 98%. So they've done really well in the last 2 weeks to turn around what was looking pretty stark. Yeah,
they've been a high percentage possession team for the last couple of years. It's their strength, but can also be their weakness if you can force them into error.
Yeah, and probably the other one too, looking at from a hit-outs and hit-outs to advantage, they're number 1 in the comp for diff, but it's the clearances they're sitting 6th, and they're -2.8 diff per game. So it's probably just being able to knowing they've got dominance in the ruck and being able to win those clearances as well.
St. Bernard's are in an interesting position now. They've been sitting in the top 4 or there and thereabouts for most of the season. That one loss over the weekend and the ladder just tightening up so much has seen them drop down to 6. They sit 4-4 right now, smack bang in the middle of the table.
Yeah, the Road Dogs and until this week, but Yeah, look, they're another strong contest team. I definitely felt looking at the numbers going into Old Halbury game, it was definitely going to match up better for them than the Old Scotch game. The biggest thing for them is being able to win at home, and it's an interesting one because when I watched them play Old Brighton, and I got to the ground there with Joey, and he showed me the honour board and everything.
It would have been the first 45 minutes of your day.
But the surface, and they actually probably got one of the best grounds to play on, I feel like, so far that I've seen in the comp. And look, I was not surprised a little bit in the Old Scotch game that they were able to just control that uncontested nature, and that's probably something for St. Bernard's. I think when they're able to force teams to go long to a contest, and that's predictable for them, that they can then defend off it and attack off it, that's an area. But it's just being able to defend for long periods, and then also too just being able to force teams into contests. Probably the parts of the Old Halbury game as well, when they were able to hit that 45 and then look to the open side, they just struggled to defend that. But it didn't happen that often. And look, they're a strong clearance team where they're second in the comp for clearance diff. So that's one area that they've been really positive. But they're a low disposal team, which is not a complete knock. But in terms of when you do play those games against the teams like Old Scotch, that's where there is a bit of a struggle.
And yeah, their record at home, we've talked about a number of times, but the teams that they have lost to, Brighton, best team in the comp, Zab, second best team in the comp, and Old Scotch, who right now are playing probably as good as the second or third best team in the comp. So it's not like they're getting beaten by lesser teams at home. They're getting beaten by the better teams.
Yeah, and then they've 32 quarters this year. They've won 12 of them as well. So they're still 4-4, and they've done well to put themselves in that position. But there's definitely areas they can tighten up a little bit to try and probably just make it more closer. They can have blowouts, and which happened in the third quarter against Old Halbury as well. So that's just the area that I feel like they can definitely hone in on.
So they've played the Road Dogs 5 games on the road. They've gone 4-1. The University Blacks have also played the 5 road games this year. They're 3-2 and on the way to a 4-4 start to life in William Buck Premier 2025. Dale Bauer's squad, it seems to have come together over the last couple of weeks. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, well, their pressure's been unbelievable. They're third in the comp for intercepts. Their pressure is a positive differential. And look, even you were talking about in that last quarter, they were, for the whole game actually, they were plus 37 tackles, 77-40. But in the last quarter, 22-5 in terms of tackles, and both teams had 73 disposals. So that was a really important part of their game. Probably it's just their scoring is something that they'll need to look at, trying to improve that. And I guess also too, from a clearance perspective, they're 10th, they're dead last in the comp for clearance diff. So being able to probably clean up a few areas there. They're obviously not getting the hit outs to advantage, but whether they can be a bit more diligent around the opposition ruck taps and getting to the right positions is probably something they'd look at needing to improve on.
And that was the basis of their come-from-behind win on the weekend. They managed to get a couple of really critical centre clearances straight out the front of the clearance, which put the pressure immediately on Scob, and ultimately that's what won them the game.
Yeah, and particularly when you need to score what you need to score when the 31-minute mark, 12 points down still, you really need that momentum from centre bounce.
But it was an interesting insight because JOEL ERNEST said the pressure was almost off them because they thought the siren was about to go, so they just released the shackles and played with that devil-may-care attitude, and it worked for them.
Yeah, and you just it's always, sometimes it's a very good position to be in, is that you kind of, you're playing with house money really in the last couple of minutes, and for probably, for St. Kevin's too, you get a bit more stickier and you can't really dictate as much. You feel like you need to defend more, and even from a centre bounce perspective, you're not really getting on the move. You're trying to lock down, and that can, hurt you.
The player that was on the move that was so interesting, I think, is Kane Loftus, who they've added to this midfield mix, who's a real genuine first and second layer player, gets the inside the first initial possession, but then gets to the outside really quickly and can hurt you with kicking goals from the middle, James.
Yeah, and he did exactly that. Streamed straight out of the middle, received a handball and nailed one from 45 on the run to tie things up. Speaking of the uni sides, let's look at University Blues, who are 2-6, but to be fair, they are a better team than 2-6. They just can't close out games.
Yeah, and that's you're spot on. That's pretty much what I had. It's just their fade outs. Second half and fourth quarter. You look at St. Bernard's round 1, goal and siren, goalless in the second half against the Bloods, and then 2-point loss to Zavs, and then on the weekend leading at 3/4 time. So it's, in terms of they're a strong aerial team, first for contested marks. They're second in the comp for ground balls, and they're intercepting quite well. I feel like I go back to clearances again, but the throw-ins, if you're going to have stoppages in games, they're ninth for clearance for throwing clearance diff as well. So yeah, they were 5-3 last year. They're 2-6, but again, they've probably been in positions where they could easily be 5-3 again, or even better, really. But yeah, that's probably the one thing, is being able to sustain that 4 quarters.
What can Matt Smith do from a coaching perspective and a structural perspective? They know now it's become a mental issue for them. They know, and their opposition know, that even if you're behind Blues and you come hard at them late, you can get over the top of them. What can the Blues do? Because as you mentioned a little earlier, you've got to be careful not to go too far the other way and try to shut games down too early. But what little tweaks can they make from a coaching or a structural perspective when they are sitting on a bit of a lead late in the last quarter to be able to just solidify things?
It might be a bit counterintuitive, but it's almost just feeling like you can still attack. You know, you can still score in those positions. It's not like you need to just defend the lead as well. And it's one of those hard ones. I feel like it's a worse feeling losing a game when you've tried to just ice the clock and defend it out. You almost feel like if you take a few risks and you lose, at least you've still tried to play offensively and feel like you play in the right spirit. I feel like it's just a worse feeling losing a game when you're just trying to defend too much and don't have the ball.
It's funny psychologically, isn't it? You do something and you play a game in a way that puts you 3 or 4 goals in front, and then you go away from that to try and save the game as opposed to just doing what's been working for you.
Yeah, and that was the Bloods in that last quarter against St. Bernard's. It was very much thinking, well, I don't think you want to start doing that now. You'd rather just kind of keep putting score on the board because your offenses look good. And so, yeah, for them, that's definitely something that, you know, you're positive too, is that you've gone into positions going to 3/4 time knowing you've got the lead. So it's just being able to just finish off the work.
So 2-6 also Collegians, saw them on the weekend. As I mentioned a bit earlier on, they got cut up across the middle of the ground between the arcs by a team that has superior ball use in the Old Zavarians. The Lions in a bit of trouble. It's their worst start since 2021. What can you tell me about Geordie Mackenzie's charges?
Yeah, well, they're zip 4 at home, so that's obviously the one area as well. You want to be able to get those wins at home, but
3 of those have been really tight losses as well. A bit like Blues, they just haven't been able to close out games. In fact, they're a lot like the Blues in terms of they're both 2-6, but they both feel like they're better teams than 2-6.
Yeah, and the ladder's still there to, you know, there's still spots up for grabs, and you can easily turn your season around. It's still early days, and probably the biggest thing I looked at with them from last year into this year is their aerial work and their contested mark in particular. They're on average last year averaging nearly 15 contested marks a game, and now it's dropped to 9 as well. And that's probably something that can really hurt you as well in terms of with your ball movement, and as the conditions might be challenging as well. You know, being able to, if you're forced to kick to contest, knowing you've got that aerial presence, or even defensively when you need to take those intercept marks, is probably something. And yeah, they're 9th for inside 50s as well. So it's just being able to help from that point of view.
And the intercept marks were the key to their game last year. That they were, in fact, the last 2 years when they won the flag, they were just impenetrable across half back. They would take the intercept mark, then they'd play the keepings off game and do it extremely well. Teams worked it out in the back end of last year and started to shut that down. And clearly it's a weapon that's been taken away from them this year.
Yeah, it has. And that's the thing. Like they're from a clearance perspective, they're 4th for clearance diff at the moment this year. So when the games are in stoppages, particularly centre bounce and their ball ups, they've been strong, but it's when you also you need to move the ball from one end to the other, and you may be forced to kick to contest, or that team's having entries and being able to get in positions to intercept mark as well. That's probably something that needs to be looked at.
Yeah, I look at Alex Lukic, who started the year so well. So now the competition's aware of him. He's a great contested marker, but he had pretty much no space in which to operate against the Old Zavarians. They were dropping the spare into his runway. He looked a bit frustrated with his inability to really get a clean run at the footy, and still was able to kick some goals in unconventional ways for a big fella. The issue now with the Lions, I think, is that Will Mayhood looked to do a pretty nasty hamstring injury as well in that game against the Old Zavarians. So they're going to be without him. We mentioned Nathan Boucher goes. This has been the story for Geordie Mackenzie for 2 years now. Had a lot of players go out last year through injury. A lot of premiership players from 2023 not playing in 2024. So it's this big regeneration of a list. So if they can get through the back end of this year and just manage to scrape enough wins, you probably need 6, I think, to feel safe, probably in a typical year. But with how close things have been over the first 8 weeks, you could see a situation similar to 2023 where Old Haileybury were very unlucky to go down.
Well, especially when your 8th and 9th teams are Blues and Collegians, who are both capable of challenging anyone on their day, right? There's not going to be, aside from De La Salle, who are yet to win a game, you look at the other 9 teams in the competition and you just think, geez, one of them is going to miss out. One of them is going to get relegated. And you look and you think, well, there's only a gap of 2 games between 4th and 9th. So it is super close. It's going to be a fascinating run home to September.
Yeah, as I mentioned just then about Old Haileybury in 2023, they won 6 games and went down by a tick over 1.5%.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. Great insight. I appreciate that, Pat. That's fantastic. After the break, we will turn our attention to Premier B as For the Love of the Game continues.
Footy's at the heart of Victoria, but gambling harm is creeping onto our fields. That's where the Real Stakes steps in. Backed by the Victorian Amateur Football Association, the Real Stakes helps local clubs tackle the risk of online sports betting head on. Get the tools, spark the conversation, and protect what really matters, your mates. Visit realstakes.com.au to find out more.
Tickets are now on sale for the VAFA's 2025 Big V Gala Dinner presented by City Power. It's a landmark event, the largest function that VAFA has ever staged, and it's celebrating 100 years of Big V representative football. This historic evening will serve as the official opening to the Rep Football Weekend, offering a unique opportunity to honour the legacy of the Big V and its enduring significance within the VAFA community. The Big V Gala Dinner will bring together past players, coaches, club representatives and supporters to reflect on a century of tradition, achievement and pride. The evening promises to be one of the most significant in the VAFA's history. You don't want to miss it. It's at Centrepiece at Melbourne Park, Thursday the 10th of July 2025. Tickets now on sale at vafa.com.au. This is For the Love of the Game. Thanks to Meckwell Care. It is time now for Paddy's speciality. Let's talk Premier B and what a season we are having at Premier B level this year, and another very interesting suite of results across the weekend.
Yeah, we'll start with Caulfield Grammarians, who will be ruining their poor efficiency in front of goal. 7-19-61. Old Trinity 10-6-66. So 10 more scoring shots for Paul Satterley's Fields, but unable to get the job done at the Daily Oval. Donald McDonald, still not coaching, handed it over to the assistants as he recovers from his knee replacement, but told me that he's quite impressed with the Caulfield Grammarians, who had a few out. No Julian Dobos in the ruck. Josh Hutchings, Dylan Ting didn't play. But the T's going okay at 6-2. At the moment, the focus for them is less about win column and more about building cohesion and consistency through their group. A big shout out to the leaders there at Daily Oval. Hugh Beasley on the forward line, Lockie Mulcahy down back have been key for Donald McDonald this year.
So the Grammarians obviously came home with a wet sail. They were 20 points down at three-quarter time and they kicked 3 goals 4 to 1-1. So they obviously came home strong but just couldn't find the winner.
Yeah, so Paul Satterley was disappointed by their wastefulness, but really happy, I suppose, that they could go with the T's, who do seem like they are at least certainly in the top 2 ranked amongst other coaches in the competition. So if we go on to our next one, now this is another rollercoaster story for Old Geelong. Their 5 weeks, it's been win-loss, win-loss, win. They got over the top over Old Camberwell. They steamed home 11 of the second half's 15 goals to win that one, 105-60, 45-point victors. The story here, Jace, is it was a day for defenders turned forward. So their typical key back, Harry Graham, usually takes the biggest forward in the back half. At halftime, they felt like they needed a different look ahead of the footy. He goes forward with the idea, he's going to bring the ball to ground. Nick Dixon's going to have trouble getting him now out of the forward half because he kicked 4 goals. He went from bringing it to the ground to clunking them and kicking sausages as well. Jacob Jess also went forward. He's a former forward. Usually plies his trade as a defender these days, also kicked 4. So a very different look for the Ogs, but it worked out for them against the Wellers.
And in such a tight season, what a result. They've jumped from 7th to 5th, but now they're equal 3rd on 20 points as well. That's how tight it is in the middle of the ladder. 1 loss or 1 win either way, making an enormous difference right now.
Yeah, their key thing at the moment for Nick Dixon is just being able to string a few wins together, not having to rely on responding after a poor performance and then having to go into another loss. They had a run of wins last year. They want to be able to replicate that through the back end.
Stringing wins together in Premier B this season is
tricky.
A very difficult thing to do because it's such an even competition.
Old Carey's next. So they went out to Brunswick Street Oval, played against Fitzroy, looked in a bit of trouble early in the second half, but this is a team that prides itself on its ability to come home strong. Fourth quarters are their best quarters. They average just over 31 points per fourth quarter. They were able to come over the top with 8 final term goals to 2, down by 7 points at three-quarter time. They ended up running out 19-point winners. Really pleased with his running power at the moment is Luke Giles. He knows that his team is a bit short of their better players. There are some reinforcements on the horizon. They're going to get Luke Bailey back after the bye. They anticipate also Will Green, who's a VFL standard and VFL listed player. Lockie Godden and James Horsey with 4 goals apiece. Mitch Wolfenden, really important in the middle of the ground for Fitzroy. Reece Seekins, exceptional on his wing. Carey got the jump on Travis Ronaldson and his Roys. They were able to work their way back into the game in the third term with high pressure, used up all their petrol tickets and were run over in the last term.
Old Ivanhoe massive winners over Hampton Rovers by 130 points. And this is significant because whilst teams are running up scores on Hampton Rovers, the percentage boost that you get in relative terms, I remember, I think Old Geelong only beat them by 4 or 5 goals. Yep. So the difference in percentage boost, if you're going to come up against Hampton, you want to have a good day nonetheless and not take them for granted because the percentage, as we talked about, the ladder being so tight. And Old Ivanhoe ended up kicking 23 goals, 23-15, 153 to 3-5-23. But the interesting thing in this one, Pat, was that they had 11 individual goal kickers, Old Ivanhoe, which when we look at footy at any level, any sort of standard, being able to spread the load like that is just so important.
Particularly in a big win as well. It's always good to be able to share the love, and they've done that, and they're going really well. They're top of the ladder, and look, they're top disposal team. Last year they were averaging about 334 disposals a game. Now they're up to 363 and 82 uncontested marks a game, which is first, and they're also intercepting quite well, 20 intercept marks on average. And then we talked about their differential in scoring and their players that can bob up, and 14 marks inside 50 as well on average. Yeah,
well, scoring in the modern game is all about one of two things, isn't it? It's either scoring from clearance or scoring from intercept, and Old Ivanhoe are able to do both. They win it on the inside, they've got a great intercept game, and then they play keepings off really well as well.
Yeah, and most of their main numbers are jumped by 10 on average since last year, so they're going well.
And your percentage point was felt actually by Old Ivanhoe. So Jared Geeshan felt that he gave his team the hardest week that they had on the track coming into this game, emphasised the importance of going into the bye at a canter and being able to get that percentage, which is going to be really important come the end of the year. They're first on the ladder, a game clear. 7-1 start to the season. I wanted to shout out Billy Murphy. 46 disposals and 4 goals. Could have had half a dozen. Gave off a few goals to some defenders who've worked really hard this year. Jack Harper had his first goal since 2023, where he was an under-19s player at Old Ivanhoe. Blake Glidden also with his first senior goal for the club on a platter from the reigning GT Moore medalist.
And Paddy, the final game of the round was right here at Elstonwick Park.
It was. So it's the first time that Williamstown CYMS have headed out to Elstonwick Park since a semi-final back in 2017 against Marcelin. A big ground, as we know, and that's been a real focus for the CYs this year to get better at playing at those bigger grounds, because we know a lot of Premier B teams play on those larger grounds, and a key victory. So 11-11, 77 over the Old Melburnians, 7-14, 56. To tell us all about it is the coach of Williamstown CYMS, Con Terzogloou. Hello, Con.
Hello, Paddy. How are we?
Very good. Not as well as you are. Let's just talk about the game, mate, because I think initially on the team sheet, as we were looking across it, on Saturday morning, you're without Jordan Buzzertle with Essendon VFL duties. You're without Zach Provost up forward, who was suspended. Keshava Raju also absent from the team list. Where did you find your performances from?
Yes, we were well aware that those guys were out, because I got told by about 15 people beforehand that they weren't playing. So everyone made a point that we were missing a few. But I mean, the reality is, guys, that we have a squad of 30 to 35 that we sort of been preparing to play senior football at some course for the year. So we have full confidence that, every one of those players can step in and contribute and play a role. And there was going to be a time that they got called on, and here we were in round 8, and we dipped into the wider group, and they all pitched in, all 22 on the day. And I know it's a little bit boring and cliche, but I mean, that's the reality of the situation, right? We know that every side is going to go through these types of challenges with injuries and absences, and we're no different. So how do you have that depth that allows you to maintain your qualities is going to be the key to success for most sides. And we were just sort of fortunate on the weekend that everyone, was all locked in and did the job.
I was looking at this time last year, Con. You were in 9th position. You were 3 wins outside of 8th. So you had that sort of relegation battle to contend with throughout the back end of the season. The complexion of the year this year feels entirely different. You've had this sort of win-loss run, and now you've stuck 2 together. How important is learning to win for your team, and how important has that been over the last few weeks?
Yeah, really critical. We made a bit of a thing about last year was great in terms of the way the story ended, but we didn't want to be in the same position in the back half of the year. So our start this year was a focus for us. And the question is, how do you be better and how do you improve? And one of those things for us we identified was winning on the road. And we know that, as an Amos comp, home wins are critical, but anything away is worth its weight in gold. So that, combined with being better on bigger grounds, we set ourselves a focus and made some tweaks to our game plan to try to be better in those games. And again, like, we're fortunate to get a result in the weekend, but that's the second this year. We had Brunswick Street Oval and now Elstonwick Park, so we're happy with that.
Particularly pleasing, I would imagine. You led by 8 points at three-quarter time, but then Old Melburnians came out and kicked the first 2 goals of the final term to hit the front. But at that point, your guys, rather than go back into their shells, they responded and you kicked the last 4 of the game.
Absolutely, JB, and like all cards on the table. And I said this to Brownie after the game. I was absolutely worried when they hit the front. It looked like momentum had swung, and while there was time on the clock, we looked like we were completely on the back foot. And irrespective of our last quarters, that's a psychological hit that you take when the other side hits the front. The most pleasing part about what happened was everyone else on the bench was calm and had confidence that we could settle and turn it. Everyone but myself, apparently. So I'm just rapt that that's how the players felt. That's how the support staff felt. That's how the players on the bench were seeing it. And to be able to settle and come back like that and finish strong, I mean, it's a testament to what we've sort of done in pre-season to make sure that we're fitter this year. But I think there's a maturity that's starting to develop in the group, which I'm really starting to enjoy watching unfold before my own eyes.
Hey, Con, just looking at your numbers as well, what do you feel is the next layer for you guys to work on for the next block of games, in particular with the next 2 weeks where you've got Camberwell and Old Trinity? We're still like, winning one game doesn't mean we're experts on bigger grounds. That's still front of mind. Like, I'm a big believer that, you know, to create habits, you need consistency in your output. So especially like the Trinity, I think Hampton's after that. So our next few away games are still going to be focused on just making sure we introduce more kicking into our game and work the ball that way on a bigger ground. And then obviously with Camberwell at home, you know, that'll be a tough game. They're a contested side as well. It's going to be tight, and, you know, there's going to be no secrets about how we want to play. We like to run and carry, and we're going to just focus on trying to be consistent with our strengths. So that's our goal for the next 2 weeks.
Speaking of tight, we've been banging on all year about how we think Premier B is probably the premier section in the entire VAFA this year in terms of its competitiveness. You've played 8 teams now. Who's impressed you?
Oh, just I feel it'd be remiss of me to leave someone out. Look, there's been some sides that have sort of got hold of us for a quarter, so you naturally lean towards those. I thought Old Ivanhoe were fantastic for 3 quarters and stood out. Trinity were a little bit scary, to be honest. I just think the way that they sort of controlled the game from start to end, and that was early on in the year. So we're looking forward to playing them in a couple of weeks. But there's that whole glut of sides in the middle. We haven't played Camberwell yet, but like the way Old Geelong, that game with them was a cracker. You know, Carey troubled us for parts of the game as well. So, like, I think anyone in the top 8, and obviously Caulfield were much superior. Geez, I've just listed off the whole.
You may have, yeah, but that's
there,
okay.
I might have well. I should have put him in tears, fellas.
Oh, no, please, Con. No, we're not going down the Grindlay model.
Every time it gets mentioned, Con, I hear stick from quite literally everyone across the analyst.
Way too confusing. Hey, to simplify things.
It's not that hard.
It is not that hard. From a CYMS perspective, what do you do well? What's your competitive advantage, Con? How do you feel like you can win the flag this year? If you do, where will you win it?
Oh, so was that the F word that I heard? I don't think we're allowed to say the F word.
Not at your club.
I can.
You can.
You're building a dynasty. Look, I'm saying 3 in a row, Con. I know, you'll take it 1 week at a time. I'll pare the question back. Where's your competitive advantage? How do you beat teams in Premier B?
That's a great question. I think it's going to be balanced for us. I think that we'll welcome any side that wants to try and play a contested brand against us. That doesn't mean that we're always going to be on top. It's been times where sides have beaten us, but we do naturally like tight, confined spaces, and that's what our home ground allows us to do. But if we continue to improve, and there's still work to be done, but if we continue to improve on our outside and run game, which is getting better, I think that having a balance forces sides to have to defend both ways. And I think, the more you can make your opposition sort of step on the back foot, that's going to be key. So if we can continue to build on that and get the balance right, I think we'll be in good stead.
Speaking of that balance, Paddy, I know you were looking at Williamstown's numbers and what they've done from last year to this year in terms of adding that extra layer to their game. And last year they were very good, I think, on a tackling front.
Yeah, last year they were first for tackles. They were averaging 66, and now this year first still for tackles, but up to 72.9 on average per game. But the biggest thing, I think, is the shift from their contest possession and ground balls. 10th for contested possession last year and now first this year. And then, ground balls 9th last year and first. So that's the big keys that I've noticed.
Has that been a focus, Con, or has it just been a natural evolution in your group?
Yep, absolutely. And, get your hands on the ball first. You're able to control what happens next. If you can layer around contested situations. So if you're winning more contested ball and can feed off, then, you're off to the races, right? And it makes a big difference when you're got the ball in hand rather than when you're chasing your opponent. So that's a good call out there, Pat. I'm starting to warm to you. If I just wait and hear what your tips will be a little bit later.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Con, as well, was Harry Miller. So he's a young guy who's come through your program, made his debut for Werribee VFL a few weeks ago. And it looks like he might get a bit of an extended run at VFL level with Zach Banch and Flynn Young out of Werribee, the small forwards being selected by North Melbourne and Carlton respectively. How does that change your approach to lining up your forward line?
Well, with respect to Harry, not much, to be honest, because like I said earlier, it's who's next in that group of sort of 35 that can come in and play a role. That's not to say that Harry's replaceable. He's a remarkable footballer and he's a remarkable young man. So we're wrapped for him and we plan not to see him again for a very long time. So we'll just continue to give opportunity to the next wave, whether that's from our unders or our reserves, but we'll just continue to blood and teach him some small forward craft, and hopefully we get, similar outputs from the wider six in the forward line.
Con, it feels like it was a significant weekend for Williamstown CYMS as a football club. Not only your men's program, but your women's program. We had the pleasure of watching them live on community TV last weekend, and they pulled off a 48-point win over St Kevin's. At that point in the season, leading into the game, they were sitting on the bottom of the ladder. It was a magnificent performance. What has it meant to your football club to have the girls come out there and do such a job on a powerhouse, perennial powerhouse in St Kevin's?
Yeah, look, I'm wrapped. You've asked about that, Jason, because look, it's their first time in Premier Division, in Prem A for the women's. So naturally, you're going to come across some of these big sides that have got the experience. And we had some big results against us earlier in the year, and the groups had to sort of find their way through and resolve. So, from a results perspective, Saturday was fantastic. But I guess from a wider club perspective, we had a luncheon there where we invited the under-16s from Willie Juniors, who are our feeder club. You get the parents down, you get the families down, you've got the reserves, the seniors. So it becomes a bit of a marketable day for our football club in the Williamstown community. And then the girls go out and put on that performance. It's just something that we're rapt to see their growth as they learn their way through a new division.
Con, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast once again. You might have to be a return guest later in the year, depending on how your squad goes. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for your company on For the Love of the Game.
Thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it as always. Keep doing a great job that you do with the podcast.
So we'll chat to you after you win the flag, Con. Is that what I'm hearing?
I will. I'll speak to you in 5 months.
Well played. Other results from round 8 in William Buck Premier Women's. Q 9-10-64 defeat of Beaumaris 1-8. 56-point win there for Q. Caulfield Grammarians by 9 points over Fitzroy 3-7 to 2-4. West Brunswick. It's a really good win for them over Old Geelong by 22 points, 6-8-44 to 3-4-22. Great win there. And as we mentioned, Williamstown, massive win over St Kevin's, which leaves Caulfield Grammarians still out in front, 2 games clear at 8-0. St Kevin's now, after dropping their second game, sit in second spot at 6-2. Old Scotch, 5-2-1, sitting on 20 points in third. Then in fourth spot, there's Beaumaris, then Fitzroy, then Q, West Brunswick, Williamstown, CYMS, and Old Geelong. So 3 at the bottom of the table, all sitting at 12 points. So the race for relegation is already on in earnest there. And as we mentioned, Q at 16 points all the way down So there's 6 teams at the moment battling for the first 4 spots, and then 3 teams battling for the bottom 3 spots. So, Paddy, clearly at the moment in Premier Women's, it has split into a race for finals and a race for relegation 8 rounds in.
Yeah, and you look at the percentage as well. So Caulfield, 325.8%. So they are far and away 8 and zip. They look like the team to beat clearly this year. Then St Kevin's and Old Scotch. I'm interested in the difference of percentage. Of course, Old Scotch having played 1 less game with the bye than St Kevin's, but they're at 335.2, St Kevin's at 167.9. Percentage is going to be key when it comes to figuring out the makeup of the top 4 come the end of the season, which is why I think that Williamstown win was so significant.
To Premier B Women's, congratulations to Old Yarra Cobras, their first win of the season. It was a big one too, 15-15, 105 over Melbourne Uni, 2-2-14. Port Melbourne Chargers continue to charge. 9-13-67 defeated Zabs 1-2-8. A big win for Old Melburnians as well. 8-8-56 over St Bede's Mentone 2-5-17. And in the final game of the weekend, it was Old Brighton 6-16-52 defeating Marcelin 5-2-32 by 20 points. And Old Brighton remain unbeaten at the top of the table on 8 and zip. They're at 32 points. 2 games clear of Port Melbourne Chargers on 24. A game further back to Old Melburnians in 3rd. And then a game and a half to St Bede's, who sit in 4th on 14 points. Then a half-game gap again to Westbourne and Marcelin. A full game back to Xavier on 10 points. Old Yarra Cobras, as I mentioned, with their first win of the season, they are on 4 points now, and Melbourne Uni on the bottom of the table. So a little bit like the Premier Women's competition right now. You've got 7 teams fighting for the top 4 spots. And at the moment, Old Yarra and Melbourne Uni bringing up the tail in the race to avoid relegation. Yeah,
it feels like the top 3's made a bit of a charge loose, that the 6-point gap between Old Melburnians and St Bede's. But then you've got St Bede's, Westbourne, Marcelin and Old Xaverians all pursuing that spot in fourth.
And all within a game of each other as well. So that one is going to be really close as we take the bye and get ready for the next part of the season. We're going to take a quick break and we're going to get ready for Prem C coming up. The battle of the undefeated teams between the Jackers and the Vultures. Who got the points? We'll find out next.
Are you looking to grow your business? William Buck are more than just accountants and advisors who can develop strategic growth plans for your business. With over 125 years' experience, William Buck has expertise in navigating through challenging times and has been working closely with the VAFA community, creating positive change for individuals, businesses and community organisations. William Buck's team of specialist advisors work collaboratively, providing you with 360 support. Schedule a complimentary consultation today by visiting williambuck.com.
Hey guys, at GYG we never compromise on the quality of our food. That's why we only serve 100% free-range chicken. We're on a mission to reinvent fast food, because who said fast food had to be bad food? Love ya.
Tickets are now on sale for the VAFA's 2025 Big V Gala Dinner presented by City Power. It's a landmark event, the largest function the VAFA has ever staged, and it's celebrating 100 years of Big V representative football. This historic evening will serve as the official opening to the Rep Football Weekend, offering a unique opportunity to honour the legacy of the Big V and its enduring significance within the VAFA community. The Big V Gala Dinner will bring together past players, coaches, club representatives and supporters to reflect on a century of tradition, achievement and pride. The evening promises to be one of the most significant in the VAFA's history. You don't want to miss it. It's at Centrepiece at Melbourne Park, Thursday the 10th of July 2025. Tickets now on sale at vafa.com.au. Welcome back to For the Love of the Game. It is time to talk Premier C, and all eyes were on the battle between the 2 undefeated teams, Ajax and Parkdale, over the weekend. They both went in 7 and zip. Paddy, what happened?
Well, yeah, close game all day. As you mentioned, 7 and zip, an opportunity to go to the bye undefeated. It went down to the final minutes. A big intercept mark by Vulture Liam Marshall, sealing the victory for Parkdale, described by Owen Layla as Leo Barry-esque to our roving reporter Harrison McElwain. The Vultures 13-6-84 to 11-8-74 victors. 10-point winners, they go into the bye undefeated, 8 and zip. What a start for the Vultures.
Elsewhere around Premier C, Beaumora 16-19, 115 defeated Marcelin 4-2-26, a big 89-point win there for Bowie. Glenira Old McKinnon 16-11, 107 defeated Paran 8-13-61. So back-to-back wins there for the Griffins.
Yes, it's the ladder as we look at it though, Jace, like it does kind of feel that the top four could perhaps be set though as I flick over the page because Parkdale, a game clear atop the ladder, Ajax and St Bede 7-1 chasing, Beaumaris a further game back 6-2 on 24 points, but then Pegs is 2 games behind, Mazanod 2 games behind them in 6th. So it does feel that definitely the top 5, but probably the top 4 have made a split from the chasing pack this year. It'll be interesting to see what happens once the season resumes on the other side of the King's birthday break.
In other results, Pegs 13-8-86 defeated Parkside 10-7-67 by 19 points. And St Bede's Mentone 17-11, 113 defeated Mazanod 11-10-76 by 37 points. Let's turn our attention to the divisions. We're going to start in Division 1, and Monash Blues coach Andrew Batten has got a clear idea of how he wants to play. They've won back-to-back games, so they've managed to climb up out of the relegation zone as they hit the bye. They got past SVU by 2 points. They're 2-6, but they've seen some really good growth. Andrew Batten saying they've had patches in every game, but the challenge is to be able to do it more consistently, and they don't want to default to the safe way of playing footy because it's not going to help with their development. They've had significant list turnover, as we know, after being relegated from Prem C last season, but a number of their young players are starting to find their feet. Ollie Armstrong, Hamish Richardson in particular. So good signs for Monash as they start to gel. Still in D1, Ormond, Vice-Captain Jackson Hill, who we've seen at VFL over the years, he was the difference between his side and Q, turned in a huge performance to keep the Monders unbeaten. They are the pace setters in D1. He kicked 8 goals. Best on-ground performance. The visitors ran out 34-point winners. Ryan Constanti produced his best performance since the season opener, and the last one from D1 for us. Oakley young gun Jay Rossington produced the best performance of his fledgling career. Best on-ground display against Theory Penola. He kicked 6 goals, led the Crushers to a 54-point win. Luke Ashen kicked another 4 goals to claim the lead in the D1 goal-kicking award. And we'll talk about Big Bags and Tunwatch shortly, and Luke Ashen has been prominent in that the whole way through. Other results from D1 over the weekend?
Yeah, Preston Bull Ants 137, Brunswick 113. So a high-scoring contest, that one. Preston coming away with a 4-goal victory. No issues, though, for the Pirates. Old Peninsula 139, Elstonwick 52. George Fletcher with 4 goals. And as I look down the Play HQ score sheet, 7 players with multiple goals kicked for Old Peninsula, who led that run pretty much wire to wire.
Let's talk Division 2 and MHSOB's hopes of finals footy well and truly alive. An impressive 20-point win over Whitefriars, who sit third. Matthew Pereira continued his impressive form, kicked 3 goals. Liam Latore was best of field. So the Unicorns now 5th outside the top 4 on percentage. And the relegation race, maybe in D2 now, starting to open up. Is it down to 3 teams? After the opening 8 games, it could be between Canterbury, Hawthorn and Aquinas. They've all won just the single game for the year. Aquinas and Hawthorn face off after the long weekend. That's going to be a huge game to help shape the final ladder. Let's have a look at the results from around D2.
Yeah, St John's by 11 points over Canterbury. Another high-scoring game, 115 to 104. St Mary's Salesian by 7 points over the Old Yarra Cobras. South Melbourne by 10 points over Aquinas, as you mentioned. West Brunswick by 61 points over Hawthorn.
To D3, and Boxall North secured the most impressive win of their season. They handed Wattle Park back-to-back defeats. Blake Williams, who's having a fantastic year, continued his great start to the season. Another 8 goals for him, so he's extended his lead at the top of the goal-kicking charts. He's kicked nothing less than 3 goals in a game this season. He's having a super year, Blake Williams. He's got 38 for the season, and he and Luke Ashen right up there in terms of our season leaderboard. And we also noticed North Brunswick claimed its biggest scalp of the season, a 7-point win over Powerhouse. Powerhouse's first defeat of the season, Paddy. One of the big positives to emerge with the consistent form of Zach DeCanny, who was mentioned amongst the best players. So that's a huge result for North Brunswick.
It is, and it makes the battle for top spot very interesting. Powerhouse 7-1, North Brunswick 7-1, both with percentages well into the 200s. A number of other results that were pretty resounding. Richmond Central by 237 points over Ely Park, 37-28, 250. Albert Park 165 defeating Chadstone 24, 141-point win there for Albert Park.
The top 4 in that division have cleared out. Powerhouse at 28 points, North Brunswick now at 28 points alongside them, and then Richmond Central and Wattle Park a game back at 6-2. Then it's a 2-game break to Boxall North and Albert Park sitting on 16 points. So right now the top 4 in Division 3 are getting the job done, which leads us to Tunwatch.
My sting.
Thanks to Sharon. It is time now to have a look at the leading goal kickers from round 8. And we have got 3 in double figures this week. Paddy, we're back, baby. Jake Dillon from Richmond Central Reserves. He kicked 12 for the weekend. And you might say, well, Jake, how on earth can he be kicking 12 goals and still sitting in the reserves? Well, I can tell you that Jack Bilson, who plays for Richmond Central in the seniors, he kicked 11 on the weekend.
Right.
So Jake just can't break into the team. He's kicking goals left, right and centre. He's kicked 37 for the year, but he still can't get out of the resis because Jake Bilson's kicking plenty of goals. So it was 12 for Jake Dillon, 11 for Jack Bilson, both from Richmond Central. And then Will Lewis, as we mentioned, from Old Brighton, kicked 10 over the weekend. 9 each to Tom Wilson from Albert Park. 9 to Nick van der Linden from Caulfield Grammarians thirds. 9 to Ed Delaney, who's playing in the Old Zabs reserves. You mentioned he's not playing in the ones at the moment. And then 8 to Blake Williams, Jackson Hill. James Tarrant, of course, from Old Scotch. Sam Ralph from St Bede's Mentone thirds. And 7 goals to Ben Young from Richmond Central senior men. So between Ben and Jack, they've kicked 18 goals and they're holding Jake Dillon in the twos despite kicking 12 for the weekend. Our leading women's scorers for the weekend, there were 6 goals. Indiana Harrison from Ormond, Georgia Cropley from St Mary's Salesian, and Chiarelli Parnell from Westbourne Seniors. That's our ton watch for round 8. Our season leaderboard, we have 2 leaders up the front. On 38 goals for the year, Luke Ashen from Oakley Seniors and Blake Williams from Box Hill North. 1 goal back to Jake Dillon on 37. 1 goal further back to Rory Calvert from Old Zabs on 36. Then on 34, Bailey Pays from Old Peninsula. On 30, it's Hugh Beasley from Old Trinity. 29, Jack Taylor Evans. 28, Lucas May, Callum Randall and Aidan Bartell from Parkdale Vultures. Leading women's goal kicker, 26 to Hannah Smith from St Kevin's.
Yeah, and it's wonderful now to see William Buck Premier Men's players kicking swathes of goals. This is what our man Joey called for earlier in the season. He said, it's all well and good to kick your 4s and 5s. We need to start seeing some double digits. So a salute to Will Lewis and a bit of a round of applause to James Tarrant as well with 8.
Tips time. And we are going to do our tips for round 9 because for the love of the game, next week we will be taking a break, but we'll be replaced by the Big V podcast with the Big V teams being announced this week, all 4 squads. We'll be talking to all 4 Big V coaches as we start the build-up to Big V weekend in July. 2 games on Saturday. The Big V senior men and women will be playing the Perth Footy League. And then on the Sunday, we'll head up to Bendigo and face the Bendigo Footy League up there. It'll be our Big V under-19s team and our Big V Premier B to D3 team. All those squads been announced this week. So next week, keep an eye out for the podcast. We'll be catching up with all coaches in our Big V podcast series building up to July's Big V weekend. So I can tell you, coming into round 9, it is Paddy on 54, Joey on 48. In Joey's absence today, the very serious and important job of doing the tips will fall to our man Pat Cortazzo. And we will start with Premier B, and we will start with Old Carey versus OMs.
Yep, so Old Carey, I think the Panthers have had a super year. They're going to get some players back. Will Green and Luke Bailey, I mentioned a little bit earlier on in the podcast, looking like they might return after the bye. I think the Panthers will be too strong for the OMs, but this will be a closer contest than the ladder says so, because the OMs, of course, have won their fair share of quarters, a high percentage, despite their rough start to life in Premier B.
Who do you like, Old Carey or OMs?
I'll go with Old Carey, I think, this week.
Willie CYMS versus Old Camberwell.
Yeah, so it depends really with Willie at the moment. Even though Con wants to focus on winning on those big grounds away from home, they're playing this game at home. They'll be too hard to beat. Willie for me.
Yeah, I agree. I think Willie as well. Their numbers are strong.
OG, the Ogs versus Fitzroy.
The Ogs at Como Park.
Yeah, Ogs for me as well.
Hampton Rovers versus Caulfield Grammarians.
I think, Hampton, tough start to the year. Caulfield should win this game.
Yep, same. Agree.
Old Ivanhoe versus Old Trinity.
1v2.
Woohoo!
This is the big one. So
it's the game of the year so far, isn't it, in Premier B?
It is. So Con did mention to us a little bit earlier in the piece about how Old Trinity was the most impressive team in Premier B that he's come across. He's also been impressed by Old Ivanhoe. These two have been, I think, probably 1 and 2 out for the majority of the year. Old Ivanhoe, I think I'm going to tip them. I just think that at this stage of the season, they are stronger than the Tees.
Yeah, take the home team as well.
So 5, you got for the first time this
point
season.
Of difference.
For the first time this season, you've done the same picks in Premier B. Let's talk Premier Men's now. We will kick it off on Saturday, June 14 from 2 p.m. on SEN. And our broadcast there starting at 1:45, obviously in the SEN app and the VAFA.com live stream. It's St Kevin's versus Old Scotch down at TH King.
Yeah, I've got St Kevin's coming out of the bye angry. I think they get it done.
Yeah, this will be a tough game. I think St Kevin's as well. I think they're due for a win.
St Kevin's at home for you both. Our community TV doubleheader from 11:35 Saturday week will be St Bernard's versus Uni Blues at the Snowfields.
Okay.
It's getting to that time of year we can call it Snowfields, can't we? The snake pit becomes the Snowfields.
I woke up that side of the city this morning. I could tell you it was very, very snowy at about 6:15 in the morning.
Can the Dogs win at home for the first time this year, or will the Blues knock them off?
I think what we saw from the Dogs with their second half performance on the weekend against Old Haileybury indicates that they can run out games well. That's been the issue for the University Blues. So I think the Snow Dogs take care of business.
I think in the spirit of Joey, it would be hard to go against the Snow Dogs, so I'll take St Bernard's.
You had a great opportunity there to tip someone else than St Bernard's in Joey's seat.
They got the Uni double at home, so this is really important 2 weeks for them.
De La Salle versus Old Zabs, another VAFA.com live stream from 1:55 Saturday week at Waverley, De La and Old Zabs.
Yeah, I think Old Zabs, as we know, Campbell Lane's going to be away, so it'll be a differently shaped team, but they will and they should win this game against De La.
Yeah, Old Zabs as well. Hopefully De La take a few quarters.
Collegians versus Old Haileybury down at Harry Trott. We've mentioned their difficulties winning at home so far this season. They've had a number of narrow losses, but the time is now for the Lions. They've got to start making their move.
Yeah, they're starting to get must-win now for Collegians. I think Old Haileybury probably get it done, though. They've shown an ability on the road to keep with teams at the very least, and I don't like Nathan Boucher and Will Mayhood, presumably not playing in this game of footy.
Yeah, I've been too impressed by Old Haileybury, so I'll be taking them as well.
Final game of the weekend, and this is a very interesting, intriguing one all of a sudden. Uni Blacks, who will be buoyed, at home against Old Brighton, who are undefeated. Off the back of the bye, Blacks or Tunners?
My heart wants to tip the Blacks because what a story that would be after their win over St Kevin's. There's nothing that Old Brighton has shown me this year that indicates that anyone can really beat them at the moment, so I'll take the Tunners.
Yeah, I'm torn as well. As much as I would love to go against the grain, I think it'll be Old Brighton, but looking at the weather out there, Uni Blacks, if they do, I wouldn't be surprised if they do get the job done.
Yeah, because the question now starts to become, they're 8 and zip. Can they go all the way and be undefeated? At some point, are they going to have an off day that someone can take advantage of?
Won't happen.
They keep talking about this oval in the centre being very muddy and whatnot, so it'll be very interesting.
I just want to note that Pat has followed me into every single tip here so far. So at the very least,
first, you would have followed me.
So. at the very least, we're going to be maintaining that advantage. I wonder, how do I play the tips now? Because I've got a bit of a lead on Joey.
Yeah,
do I just try and do I play it strategically? Do I tip with my heart? Do I try and just maintain the win?
If you're in front, you can just keep picking the favourites every week, and it's incumbent on Joey to have to pick the upsets to try and run you down. And even if he picks 2 upsets in a weekend, but 2 of them don't get up, he doesn't make up any ground.
Yeah, there's only one room for a tipping coward on this podcast, I think, Jason. That's your good self. So I think you've got to try and play to win the game of footy. That's the story.
The one I was going to potentially go against you was the Uni Blue St Bernard's game, but I thought in the spirit of Joey, I didn't think he would enjoy it.
Betray the great man.
He'd fall off his chair. Not to mention that bloke on Twitter who'd be like, Joey's jumped off the Dogs.
He's still got his shares. I've been in touch with him. He's still got his shares.
That is it for us For the Love of the Game this week. Thanks so much for your company once again. As we mentioned, next week we'll be focusing on the Big V, so keep an eye out for the Big V podcast. To all our players, coaches, support staff, enjoy your King's birthday bye weekend, and we'll catch you again next week.